2, 1.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals February 21st, 2018 public hearings. We have one item on the agenda, and before we start, I'd like to welcome and introduce Tim Higgins, whose official title is
Community Development Director.
Community Development Director. So we're happy to have him on board, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you at some more meetings in the future. So welcome.
Pleasure to be here, and I will.
We're very happy you're here. I think collectively as a board, we can all say that.
And please advise when you think you'd like me here. I don't anticipate attending every meeting, but I'll make myself available, and we'll be happy to do any research and follow up information.
Yep,
as you
that'd be
might
great.
need.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, with that said, we have a continuation of case number 26-17, Union Street CME LLC.
This is Dan, Tim. You will see Dan quite often.
I have met.
Oh, you already have? There you go. I call that one. You will see him quite often.
All right, welcome.
Not
All
that we're
yours.
tired of you, Dan.
Okay, let me bring you up to speed on where we are. We've made, I think when we last left off, we had some technical issues to address with the town engineer's comments. We have revised the site plan, not very substantive revisions. We added some dumpsters. We went from 17 spaces to 16 to make room for the dumpsters. We added evergreen trees here to screen the westerly single-family homes. We added some signs about it being in the Walpole Brook watershed area, no salt usage. You know, a lot of little kind of notations. We added the soil log to the site plan, technical stuff. And you have a response from Maggie, basically indicating that the plan is okay as revised. And the Conservation Commission has closed their hearing and issued an order of conditions for the project. So the outstanding issue that's still out there is this question of 6.4C, the multiple principal structures. We submitted a request for basically 2 special permits, one for a multifamily 4-unit special permit for the existing house, which has historically been used for 4 units. And then one, a 3-family dwelling to convert the barn from a barn to a 3-family dwelling. Dave has had some conversations with town council about this. I don't know, Dave, if you want to give an overview.
Good evening, Dave Norton.
Yes, good to see you, Dave.
You too. Here's the thing, at the last meeting I was at, when you were discussing this, obviously, it was a little surprise to the board, even talking about 6C4 when you have 3 buildings that exist, and that was white premise. Yeah. But at the time, I didn't elaborate too much on it, only because I hadn't fully talked to town council about it. That being said, 6C4 is under moratorium. So that someone can neither apply, nor can the board deny something under 6C4, because technically it doesn't exist. So right now, technically in the bylaw, there's no wording that talks about one principal building as a residence, not having more than one. Talking to town council today, we're both in agreement that there is nothing in the bylaw to allow it, so it would be a use variance, and we can't, the board cannot do use variances, so they cannot apply it that way. Okay? Everyone following me so far with this?
I'm not actually.
Okay, that's okay.
I don't know why we even went to town council for the
Why do we
moratorium.
have to go to town council?
Well,
I wanted to clarify that because of the moratorium itself, did it give any other avenue? Okay? And I wanted to make sure that it didn't. Because that was never presented to town council when they did the moratorium, because they did it in one night on the floor. So it's never been brought to town council at all. So she agreed that, yes, you cannot grant something under 64 because it doesn't exist right now.
right.
It's in moratorium, so you can't do it, okay? Under 5, where the special permits are now going to be, again, it doesn't allow you to say more than one principal building, okay? So you can't issue it that way either. That being said, one thing town council did bring up, in which I'm totally in agreement with too, 48 section 7 in the past year has changed, okay? no longer is a structure after 10 years without a building permit that created it, or the use that created it. Now it's not just non-conforming. The single one here, okay, that's still, it's considered a single-family residence. This is still considered a four-family residence. Okay, even though going back in history, it only identifies this as a 3.
Right.
Okay, but because of that change in section 48.7, these actually now are called non-conforming. So since these are non-conforming, he can still do these by right. The question now is this one: what do you do with it? Now again, under 64, because it doesn't exist anymore, you really can't give a special permit for it. So the board, looking at this whole picture, has to decide, is there an avenue to do anything with this? And I think you may have another proposal with that, but
What you're saying is that that structure had not been previously used as a residence, so even though it's it may be legally non-conforming with respect to certain things, the change in use is
Right.
something that would require a variance.
yes.
What was the specific change in 48.7? Do you remember?
Well, before, it's like, if someone was built with a permit,
Right.
let's say shed was too close to lot line, we didn't catch it.
Correct, yeah.
Okay? 6-year statute of limitations. If the building department caught it within that 6 years, they'd have to move it.
Yes.
Outside of that 6 years, it's now considered non-compliant.
Non-compliant.
Not compliant,
Yeah.
which means I can't issue permits on it or anything else. But it can stay. We can't make it take it down. With 10 years, say you didn't get a permit at all, you built something, created something, et cetera. 10 years go by, we don't catch it, same thing. It's considered non-compliant. That's a statute of limitations. But it's not considered pre-existing non-conforming. What changed in 48.7, non-compliant goes away. Now everything's considered pre-existing non-conforming.
Which allows you with special permits to
Exactly.
enlarge
Allows
or
you to
alter or
do-
expand it. Yeah.
Yes. And the whole idea, supposedly the premise of all of that was to create more housing. I don't know if I really agree with that one, but
Well, but, I mean, don't we have a situation here where we have multiple principal buildings on the lot? And even though that bylaw is in moratorium, isn't that to itself a now pre-existing nonconformity because it existed for more than 10 years?
yes, these two.
Those two.
These two.
No, I'm looking at the lot, the use of the lot.
Correct.
So I'm looking at it, not the use of the building, I'm talking about the use on the lot.
Right.
The use on the lot is multiple principal buildings.
Correct. Well,
Multiple principal residents, I should say.
These two are. This is not. That's a barn. So it's not a principal dwelling unit.
I know what you're saying, but
You know what I'm saying?
I know, right, if the use on the lot, but.
It's a
you know,
pre-existing,
but then,
non-conforming use.
then you're saying, doesn't, you know, if you could build 5 more, because it's pre-existing non-conforming.
Well, but that's an expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming
But
use.
so would that be if there's a building that is not residential now and you want to make it residential, and so you had 2 residential buildings and you go to 3, that would also be an expansion of.
An extension of a
Special
nonconformity. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's why I was laying it out to the board. I'm trying to lay it out that way to the board because you actually have some options to discuss this because this is unusual, and not only being unusual, after they just changed it within the last year, we're going to be dealing with this a little bit more and a little bit more because as it starts coming up. I hate to say it, but we will be.
What's the date of construction on
What's
those
that?
Do you know what the date of the construction of those buildings were?
1800s.
Yeah, they were.
So it predates any zone in the
Yes.
town.
Yeah, it's zoning completely, except for this one.
Right. That's
That-
still old.
That one was somewhere in the 30s, I believe.
I was gonna say early
Right.
1900s, yeah.
Right. But it's clear that it's been a resident for at least 40 years.
Nobody cares about the illegal part of it, though.
No, because technically 48.7 kind of nixed that.
This is more than 10 years.
So what is the issue?
Right, except
I mean-
We can't
continuous
do a
use too.
special
Continuous
permit
use,
for
exactly.
for
That's
that.
the other. But again, continuous use,
Abandonment of a use.
abandonment. And there's case law to a fact that just because you take a house and somebody goes away for 2 or 3 years to wherever, they come back, it's still a residence. That use didn't go away. You have to physically abandon it. So if you had gone there and gutted the house, well, let's say, because I actually had this happen. Somebody actually gutted a house. It was a 3-family, and they knew it was a 3-family. Had all the documentation. They came in, pulled a building permit, gutted the whole house. Didn't touch it for over 2 years. Then came back and said, well, I want to put now 3 units back in it. It's like, well, you can't. You already abandoned that use when you gutted it 2.5 years ago. That's the abandonment rule.
And that third building, had it ever been used for a resident?
Well, there's a question to what, I don't have any proof of it exactly. There is some indication that it may have been at one time, but.
The barn?
The barn.
I'm sure Foster had everything loaded up.
It may have been.
Cash on the checks. Are you kidding me?
I've heard some of these stories, so.
The barn.
being used?
Yeah.
There is a kitchen and a bathroom?
There is a kitchen and a bathroom.
I imagine he would use every inch he could.
Oh, that's been there, that has been there a long time. Because, I don't wanna say, I've been here over 50 years, and then
And
all
and I believe you.
It goes
I
her
bel-
Dedham speech.
Right.
All
So that's why, I mean,
those things have
I at
been
least
there.
wanted to lay it out to the board, after talking to town council, what I'm looking at, what we're looking at. This would be pre-existing, this would be pre-existing, and this is in question. So it's how you handle the barn is really, I mean, if the board believes it was used as residence one time, it would be a special permit.
Comes with the easiest.
Well,
Well, I know,
you-
but all of them
I
are
mean,
used.
because the board doesn't give out legal advice, I would be interested to hear from the applicant in terms of how they would like us to proceed.
Is this the first that you're hearing of this?
Well,
About 30 minutes ago.
I'm not as sure,
Man,
I'm at sea to figure what the relevance of this is.
Well, the relevance is how you handle it, because
precedent.
they were asking for two different special permits?
No, I was just thinking, I'm thinking if the issue is whether or not that barn was used as a residence, that can be easily proven. And how,
I mean, it's just never been brought to me to be proven about the barn, that's.
well, I mean, it could be in one, it may be, but it may also, you know, who knows, right? If somebody was just living there and didn't, you know.
Foster wouldn't let anybody live there for free.
So,
no,
Wouldn't happen.
trust me.
It wouldn't.
so how would you know then?
kidding.
What would
I
what
can't
would be
make this
the?
up.
Well, short of going in there and seeing for myself,
Yeah,
there were multiple residents in there. Multiple cars,
yeah.
windows had curtains on them.
And why
Would
would
appear
anybody have
to
a
me-
kitchen and a
You had a
bathroom
couple
for the
of
horse?
meals over there.
Yeah, it would appear to me that people were living there. I don't know who puts curtains in a barn if
Could
they're
be,
not,
could be
you
an
know,
office.
if
we
they're
don't
shy
know.
something on it.
Shy horses.
Just,
And so I'm just thinking to myself, are we creating a problem that we
Right.
didn't have to start?
I mean, the whole discussion started with town council over 64 and its implementation or not implementation. And obviously it was brought up at the first hearing, and I have not been able to
Yeah,
talk to town council till today about a multitude of issues, but all of it got talked out. We actually talked for a while about it, and basically came down to the two of the buildings technically pre-existing non-conforming.
But if I understand the 40A7, if the town had never had a bylaw, ever, of multiple principal buildings on a lot, and someone were to construct and use multiple principal buildings on a lot for a period of 10 years, under the current regulation, they would be pre-existing non-conforming.
Under the new one, yes. Before they were
Irrespective
non-compliant.
of the Walpole's bylaw or the moratorium on Walpole's bylaw. So, you know, so if the applicant wished to present information about a use that was more than 10 years old, then we could hear it under 40A7.
Technically, yes. And again, it was originally brought to me as I called it, the shed and the main house were brought to me, and all the attention were on those two. We never actually talked about the barn, other than it was gonna come here anyway. So,
What, sorry, are you,
No, I'm sorry.
I'm just looking at the general residence regulations. I mean, residential use is allowed in some cases by special permit, but I'm trying to, what's the variance that they're saying that is required here for converting it to
Use.
But it's allowed by special permit, so it could get.
It is allowed by special permit in 5, but because we're back to the whole issue of multiple buildings sitting on one lot.
Okay.
Now, if there was, well.
But as to that, but as to that piece of it, wouldn't it be, just in terms of numbers of buildings, that's seemingly legally non-conforming because it predated zoning and predated 640C?
I think it depends on their application. I mean, right now, we have in front of us an application.
5. Yeah, I mean,
I don't, yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
It's just a question of whether they.
What, all right,
So there's,
go ahead, I've got a couple questions, but go ahead.
so a thought, just based on this conversation, is that under 9.3A, right, going back to what Mr. Hilt suggested, if you're looking at multiple principal structures being a non-conforming use, being a use, and it's non-conforming, this lot, this property has that pre-existing non-conforming use designation. And under 9.3A, a non-conforming use may be altered, expanded, or extended by special permit from the board. So I think you could view it, and this is a very unique circumstance that would not really happen very often. You know, 3 existing structures, substantial structures, old structures. You wouldn't come across a scenario like this very often, but I think you could view possibly under 9.3A that you could have the authority to grant a special permit to extend the use into the barn, which is an already existing structure there. Now, the applicant does have information from the prior property owner that the barn was used for a residence at some point in the past. There were people living in there. There's a kitchen and a bathroom in there. They were paying rent. I don't know how extensive it is or was. I would have to get some information to the board on that topic, but you know, 9.3A is a possible way we could go. Another possible way that Dave and I chatted about is subdividing the lot and putting the house and the cottage on one lot, and they either stay pre-existing non-conforming, or you grant a special permit for the house, you make it, you know, kind of legal instead of pre-existing non-conforming, and then the second lot will contain the barn, and the board could then issue a special permit for a 3-family dwelling unit on the second lot in the barn. That's another possible way to go.
Yeah, isn't there that quirky provision in the subdivision regs about multiple principal dwellings in a subdivision?
Well, there's that provision. I don't think I would go down that road with this, but yes, there's a provision where you can take a lot with multiple principal structures and subdivide it, but there's case law that says it doesn't become not pre-existing, non-conforming. It's kind of messy. We have tons of frontage, tons of lot area.
Right. Yeah, you don't need
We could do that here. I mean, I think it would be easier for the applicant to keep it all together in one, but if we were to go the 9.3A route.
So refresh my memory again about the timing, the current use as of today, or just the history of how long it hasn't been used and all that stuff. So right now you have the house.
Yeah.
That's a single family house.
No, it's chopped up for 4.
The back, I'm sorry, the front, the back, what's the back?
This building is chopped up for 4 units.
And when was the?
And then this is 1 unit, 1 single unit.
Right, and people are living in?
People were living in the house until very recently.
Right.
He's renovating it now, but.
And the back building?
The cottage, I don't know how
Okay.
long it's been since somebody lived in that. We could find out.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. 2 years. Couple of years, a year or 2.
Yeah.
And the barn.
I would be interested to hear about if you have any information on the residential use of the barn and how long since that's been discontinued.
Okay. We would have to get that from the prior owner. All we have is basically Mike's conversation with Melody.
We could get it with a tenant who lived in the main house. He lived there for 20 years, and he told me on my way in that, yeah, there was someone living there. And then I could ask ask Foster's daughter to give a letter.
And the reason why I'm interested in that is because I do recall, and I couldn't cite the case, I do recall that we had a case where there was a pre-existing non-conforming use, and there was some discussion or proposal to expand that use to other buildings. And we had some concerns about that we, at least I remember the discussion was that we were allocating the use to the building, and so therefore, couldn't be expanded to other buildings. I think we've got a little bit of a different situation than that case, because then it was just a single residential use where you already have a pre-existing multiple primary residential buildings on the lot where they didn't.
Right.
But if we could have a non-abandoned use on the barn, I think that would support this a little stronger.
Okay. I'm going to suggest this. We learned a lot of things in the last half an hour. So I think we'd like to ask for a continuance to your next meeting. We will track down information on the historical use of the barn, and we can present that to the board between here and your next meeting. And then hopefully at your next meeting we can button this up one way or another.
Next meeting's slammed, isn't it?
It is, we've got four.
We have 5, I thought you told us.
No, the 5th one came in a little bit late, so that's
Oh,
in
did it?
April.
Okay.
We have one on April 4th. We
April
have
4th?
4 new ones on March 7th.
She said April 4th.
No, we have 4 hearings that night.
On March 7th we do.
Yeah.
April 4th we have 1 so far.
As an alternative,
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of very valuable information tonight. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
I agree.
You have enough information?
I have a lot of information if the applicant is
We
prepared.
will get to you. Yep, I won't forget you.
Thank you.
We haven't yet, have we?
Never.
All right.
I know your feelings.
You feel you're okay with it? I am too.
I'm not there, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not there either. I mean, I think we need
yeah.
information.
In terms of, with the bylaw, the 4 families, I mean, I think if that's the use it's been in the house, I mean, if we, had information on it, that would be helpful, but, I'll say where the barn is where I'm, adding 2 more units in a separate building there.
Although it's definitely.
I think it'd be, I think it would definitely be an improvement, and.
If we could validate the bond, would that be a non-issue then? Would we be there then?
Yeah, like I said, I think the problem I'll have with the barn is it probably was a single residence, or was it 2 residences? I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
We're not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big barn. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
But again,
So-
you, under 9(3)(a),
We
you
can
know, would
expand.
have the authority to allow
We do.
expansion,
We
alteration
do, we can expand on that.
of that use.
What's that
But I
use?
think, yeah,
Multiple principal buildings?
Well, you look at it as multiple principal buildings, and if, to get to the
No,
point.
what's the use, though, that we're expanding? Multifamily?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always find, I've tried that, I've been down
It
that.
does work under
That, that's, if you have a multifamily use at, 4 units, then anything more than 4 is still a multifamily use, so that one I struggle with a little bit, but that's just me, so, I'm trying to think of,
yeah, I mean, this is just a thought, and I haven't, obviously thought this all the way through, but it seems to me there are 2 different questions. One is the application of Section 5, and the use can be made conforming, I think, by the grant of a special permit. Residential use is allowed in that district through a special permit from us, so that can be made conforming by the grant of that permit. And then the question with regard to 6, if it's legally non-conforming because it predates that provision of the code, then I think there's an argument to be made that they're allowed to have as many principal buildings on that lot as existed at the time zoning this took effect. So you might be able to piece those two together to get there without having to even issue a special permit under 6, because it's legally non-conforming and you're not adding another building.
Right, the buildings are all the same.
Right.
Yeah, in my mind, I think that this all existed long before the town even contemplated
Right.
6.
Right.
And
Right.
therefore, you know, even if 6 never came into play under
Right.
9,
Right.
Yeah.
right, that's how we're hearing this. Combination
But-
of 5 and 9, as you said.
Well, I guess what I'm not sure about is, do we even need 9? Because it's not, you can take a use, let's say it was an industrial building at one point, which would not be allowed in the general residence district, but they wanted to convert that building to residential to make it conforming as to use. That's allowed. That's not an extension of a non-conforming, it's actually changing from a non-conforming use to a conforming use. So if residential is allowed, it should just be allowed, under the current zoning, it's allowed by virtue of the special permit. But they don't have to worry about conversions or the timing of things, because they're just dedicating it to a use that's permitted by special permit.
Certainly up to the
Yeah.
applicant as far as what relief they are seeking.
Right.
But, you know, I'm just thinking not, because, forget the change of use of, the potential change of use of the barn. The project in and to itself is a alteration of a pre-existing non-conforming. And under that, they may want a special permit, not just for the Section 5 use, but the alteration work that he's doing, because that's what 9
Yeah,
gives.
yeah.
I'm just saying, even if it's on the same footprint, right?
Well, but I guess, and I don't, we can debate this, I guess, but I don't know that if it were a non-conforming use and they were continuing that use, they wanted to expand that use, that's currently not allowed by the bylaw, that would be, I think then we would resort to 9 to look at that. But in this case, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, that you're going from a use that may not be currently allowed to a use that is allowed. In other words, they're making it conforming as opposed to expanding something that will continue to be non-conforming as to the use of the building.
But I think the opinion of council is that the 5 permits the use, but only for a single building on the property.
That's
You
a
can't
council
have-
thing?
That's,
I thought that's what I heard.
Yes,
Five has always been used as an individual building.
single,
So that's why the special permits would have to be 2 separate ones if you're doing 2 separate
Yeah.
buildings. Because that special permit to allow more units is within one building.
Right.
But I understand where you're.
yeah.
I apologize, I don't want to sit down. I understand where you're going with pre-existing nonconformity, which is the multiple buildings.
Right.
right.
Not the units, we're just talking about
Right.
just the buildings.
Right.
So that is a pre-existing non-conforming, that would allow you to, in my mind, to put residential into it.
Mhm.
Right.
So then you're just doing a special permit to allow whatever, 2, 3, whatever it is, that they want to put in that building. But I actually like the.
Because the other,
Oh, I
the
like
conversion
the
or the
Yeah.
renovation work to the other 2 buildings doesn't require a special permit as to the use,
I
right?
do.
Under
Right,
5.
because it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, he's still allowed to do the construction he wants to, as long as you're not adding anything else to it.
Did you get anything in writing from town council, or was it
No, this
just
was just a
discussion?
phone call
Okay.
conversation today.
So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know if we need
I think you're on
anything,
it.
but I just.
No, I mean, I could format it
think
in an
you've got
email and then get it to you if you want, or if you want to.
Yeah, if we got it
Put it in
Well,
an email the way you
I think, yeah.
want.
I don't want to get out ahead of town council, they
No,
haven't viewed
I
it, but,
I mean, if you think that, it would help, you
Yeah.
know, the argument,
I
how you phrase it
I
sounds
think
pretty
you
good,
pretty
but.
much nailed it, though. I do.
I know you may have had other questions for me, I'm not sure if they're already getting answered or not.
Yeah,
But when I looked at this, just so you know, because I only looked at these 2, and I didn't think the way you would put the whole non-conforming part of it, that this one, not knowing for myself that there was ever used as residence,
That's why I was just like, well, I'll let the board make that determination. So,
Well, the horses didn't really need a bathroom and a kitchen. At least the ones I've
I
had.
think I'm glad I never met them.
Well, right. I mean, it could have
Had
a
you met
a
Bob
bathroom and a
Foster, you
kitchen,
would
but
have,
it could have.
you would have known
It's a-
that he always had somebody there to get the check.
Oh,
Oh, God.
Sounds like you guys
R.I.P.
don't need any more information.
Well, I don't want
Thank
to
you
get
for this.
appealed either, but
Well, I think, well, with that said, couple quick housekeeping things on this. We have, I must have just put it somewhere else. Here it is. We have a comment from the town engineer from February 13th. On drainage, the locations of the proposed post and wetland plaques have been shown on the plans. The symbol used should be so labeled. In general, the developer's engineer should consult with engineering and with E911 to ensure adequacy of addresses. And a condition of approval is requested requiring the submission of utility as-built plans for the site. Nothing, just that one page, right? Okay, I'm sure you saw that, so nothing major. That was the only new comment that came in. You have anything to add?
Only that if you're going to ask someone to say that it was a single-family use at one time, I would request that it be in an affidavit form.
Yeah,
So
right.
that you have a.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we asked for that, but I'm not even sure that we're gonna, it seems like the board's, you know, I'm still unsure in the barn how we get to it becoming from not a residential use if it was abandoned, but.
I also presume there's no separate meter on the bond for electricity?
There is.
How about some bills, past bills?
Yep, right. Yeah.
It clearly seems at one point it was
Yeah.
residential. I mean, if it had a kitchen and a bath, but.
I know it was used for residential, but the other issue is it may be kind of difficult to get this because I'm assuming that after Bob Foster died, his daughter inherited this and didn't want to be bothered. But so I'm sure whoever was living there is long gone. Whether she ever knew who they were or not, I don't know. Because I'm sure Bob Foster had this all tied up in some kind of whatever, so that it would all be, he's laughing, but it's true. He probably had it all sewed up so that after he died, everything went, you know,
he had some
as he
guy.
wanted it.
he had a guy that was like a caretaker type person. I can't remember his name. He had, you probably know who it is by now. He had some guy that was like in charge. Yeah.
Yeah.
He what?
He told me that there was a person living in the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's lived there for almost 20 years.
Yeah, I knew he had some guy that was in charge of the dwellings.
No. You want? I know you had your hand up before. Comment from the public.
Cheryl Hazelmont, 8 Brook Lane. For the first time ever, I actually agree with Dave as far as.
Thank God it's on film.
I know.
First for everything.
But I agree about, finding a way to let this happen, within the rules and regulations. I've only lived there for 10 years. My neighbors live on Brook Lane for, I think it's 30 now. And yes, her children grew up with the caretaker's children. So they were there for like 20 years. And Mr. Foster had some unsavory characters.
They had cats.
Who, yes, exactly. Who I believe inhabited that barn. In the past 2 years, probably not, since he had passed away. I believe it was just like the caretaker and the family who stayed there and took care of that property for the daughter. And she would come up, I think, once or twice a year to just check on things. But I understand we have to do the rules and the regs, but I think we need to find a way to work through that, because I think Mike is trying to make everything legal, which was not legal before. There was lots of transient people in and out, and I believe it was in that barn, because it wasn't in the caretaker cottage. So you know, that's just kind of my experience with like the Foster property in the past 10 years of what would kind of go on in that area. But the people who were there all the time, day in and day out, was the caretaker. Like, they took care of Mr. Foster and they took care of that
They
property.
actually took care of him, yeah.
Right.
But again, I'm personally okay with it because again, he's making it what it should have been to begin with, which is if you're gonna let people live in a barn, you know, then have it like zoned appropriately, or have the building permits done appropriately, and all the other stuff. No different than if it was my house with the in-law apartment, you know, it has to have the right stuff. So in that sense, I'm like, he's actually fixing something that Mr. Foster got away with for many a year. So that would just be my personal take on it, and yes, I do agree with Dave.
Yes. Anybody else from?
It's bad when you still come back and haunts us.
Yeah.
So I guess to recap, I think the board has pretty broad discretion in a very unique circumstance like this with multiple existing substantial structures that have been used for principal uses in the past, existing multifamily on the site for a long time, very unique circumstance. I think you could look at it a couple of ways, and if the board was inclined to convert the application from, under 5 to a 9.3A special permit, the applicant would absolutely agree with that. If the board was inclined to add a 9.3A special permit to the mix in addition to the special permits that were sought, again, the applicant would agree with that approach.
Bob, how again you would feel about having the barn under what bylaw provision? On the barn is 2 units.
He wants you to convince him how you convinced me and Jane.
I would just kind of throw out there that,
That's right.
Mike could have come in here and proposed to tear everything down and just put up
Correct.
a 20-unit
No,
apartment
it's
building,
sad.
because the lot is 9 acres. It would support that kind of a use. So, in terms of intensity of use, what the applicant's looking for is not very substantial in light of what the property could support.
Yep. True.
See.
I'm just,
You're not gonna get me there, but yes.
I'm just trying to separate the use question from the multiple buildings on the lot question. And with respect to use, residential is allowed in this district.
And multifamily is with the special permit, right?
So with respect to use, I think converting the barn is a
like you
non-issue.
said, you could do a
Right.
20, I mean, you could, it's a general residence zone, you could do with the
And then
special
with
permit,
respect-
multifamily, yeah.
And then with respect to 6C, whatever, it's legally non-conforming with that requirement because it has 3 buildings, but those 3 buildings predate the zoning. And they're not adding another building to make it further increasing that non-conformity. They're just sticking with the 3 buildings they have. So with respect to the number of buildings on a lot, I think they're legally non-conforming as to that, so they don't even need a special permit under 6 because it's legally non-conforming and they're not increasing the non-conforming, not changing that non-conforming nature.
They're expanding or enlarging that you're intensifying the use on there, though.
But the use is allowed. They could make.
Well, right, it's allowed with a special permit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I view it as 5 permits a single principal building with that use. In this case, we have 2, not 3, that have the residential use as the principal use. And so that's the pre-existing nonconformity use of the lot, is having 2, and so therefore the 9.3 application or special permit would be to expand the 2 principal residential buildings to 3 residential buildings. The third being a multifamily permitted as right, well, it's permitted under special permit for this district. That's why I was thinking the 9.3 would be required because it's an expansion or alteration of a pre-existing non-conforming use to principal.
Yeah, I guess that's the question, whether you consider the number of buildings to be a use of the property, or whether you consider it just to be effectively, well, it has more to do with structure to me than use, but that's, but I'm open to, I think if it would be beneficial to get the information about the historic use of that building as residential, does that?
I would say the print use of buildings, it's in section 6 of the bylaw, is more of a dimensional thing than a use thing. But, how many buildings? Yeah, right.
Well,
the
reason why I look at it as a use is, I have 2 buildings on my lot, okay, a garage, an attached, well, there's an attached living space, and a residence. But I mean, most properties have, a garage and a residence. You don't use a garage for residential use. And so the way I see it is a use, pre-existing non-conforming use, is because they're using the buildings for residential purposes. And the expansion of that use of having multiple principal residential buildings, and to use a third building for residential purposes is what is the expansion of the use. And in other cases, you'd have to convert a garage to a second use, whereas here you already have 2 residential uses on the lot, and you're expanding that to a third.
Yeah.
Well, to me, this seems to be a no-brainer. I have to be very honest with you. I mean, he outlined it, and I think it's on the money. I can't imagine who's going to raise an issue with this. I mean, the likelihood of anybody, they're on Union Street, busy street, the likelihood of anybody saying, oh, well, such and such never was proved that somebody lived there, given the fact that you could put up condos or, heaven forbid, other things, could go there. I just think, I don't know. I just think we're perseverating a lot. I can't understand why it's becoming such an issue. We went over and over, but you know what, but I'm looking, but you know what, I'm looking at the Petrosi thing and thinking, how we perseverate, trying to make that work. Here's something in front of us now that was non-conform, been there before zoning even existed, and there's a way that we can legally do it, and we're now, I'm at sea to know what the big issue is.
The bylaw, just reading what the bylaw says.
But have they not resolved that? I just think
it's fine. I don't think it doesn't matter.
To me, I just think it's a no-brainer, but then, I don't know. I look at the alternative, he's spelled it right out here. The buildings were there in use for whatever he was gonna use them for. I mean, the buildings have been there and been used by Bob Foster for eons and eons. He's dead 2 years, and now there's a question, who was here and who was there? People lived there while he was there. And if it comes down to, we need to have it 100% validated by somebody with an affidavit, then go for it. But personally, I cannot see the need to have to go through that. I mean, when I think of, you worry about things like if an I wasn't dotted and a T wasn't crossed, what will be the ramifications? Well, I can't imagine. If anybody.
You want more proof?
No,
yeah, I don't know.
We should just throw the bylaw out then. I mean, the bylaw's the I'm just reading what it says. That's all.
What?
We gotta treat.
What section are you reading? I'm not sure I'm following.
It's the barn right now is not there's not, if it's abandoned use, it's been abandoned. If you convert it back to residential, it's another principal building on
It's
that lot.
probably been abandoned
But-
since he died and people left, is what I'm
That's
trying
what
to
I was
say.
asking, is when,
Yeah.
what's the, how long has it been abandoned? If anyone else comes and says, I had this use way back at some point, and, you didn't let them convert something just because they said it was a prior use, and people know it was, but, again,
Okay.
just one person.
I think
We
I'm-
could close it and go.
I think
well,
I'll follow
really
your
don't-
concern.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what you're arguing is that the use is of the building, not necessarily of the lot. Therefore, you're saying that the use, we can't expand the residential use to the barn if that use has been abandoned.
Well, it's a separate structure, so
It's a
you have
separate
multiple
structure.
principal dwellings.
This is it's ridiculous.
Then I don't, look at, you guys can do what you want.
Where's the abandoned section?
Abandoned section's clear as.
Well, because if they're gonna bring more some
I think so
information.
too.
Did you look at
9.3A, it's pretty clear.
Yes, no?
Right, I don't have a problem with the use residential. I'm saying you're taking another structure that could or could not be a residential use, and you're saying you could put 2 residential units in there. It's and under the guise of something else could be done there. I mean, I'm not sure what else could be done there, but.
Could be taken down, condos could go up there.
That's. If it could have, I
Coulda,
don't
woulda,
think
shoulda,
that.
yeah.
Well, I guess
I
there's
don't
a
know,
question,
I
well, there's a
made-
question.
So I made a good argument for it, so
Well-
Yeah,
that's
I'm
fine.
ready.
But I guess the question about what the 9A, actually, I'm looking at the app, if this is the right one. Was there a request for a special permit under 6.4, or, because
No,
it looks like
the request
the
was
notice is
for
just for 5.
5, yes.
And it doesn't reference 9, so if we were gonna
We can
consider it
amend.
under 9,
We'd have
we
to
can
amend.
but would you have to renotice it, or no?
No.
You don't, okay.
So if you wanna go with Bob's, his
No, if you want more
structure.
information, we can definitely have more information.
Yeah. Bob's argument sounds good.
Where's your abandoned?
What?
Abandonment's discussed under
G?
9.2G. 3, I'm looking at 3, which basically says the discontinuance or abandonment of a part of a non-conforming use doesn't create abandonment of the whole. So that kind of goes to what you're talking about here, which is, pre-existing multifamily, multiple principal structures.
I think where the
Two is
disconnect
not
is,
applicable.
whether the use extends to the lot or to each individual building. And I think that's where we're stuck, a little bit. And I don't know if anybody has any, I was gonna say opinion, but legal opinion on that.
I mean, they said it was a residential use, so.
He has to have a legal one?
Well, I guess I'm still thinking of, sorry, go ahead.
I thought I knew where you were kind of going with this, and now I'm a little perplexed. This is probably the first time I've seen Matt. You're spinning in it. I can see it. What you were stating was the pre-existing nonconformity here is right now there's 2 principal units, 2 principal buildings on the lot, right? That's the nonconformity. Which it is, because the 64 technically doesn't exist anyway, but even then, they were built before zoning, so they are pre-existing 2 principal buildings. An extension of a nonconformity would allow it to go into the 3rd, right? That's an extension of a nonconformity, because the nonconformity is 2 principal buildings.
Extend, yep.
So an extension would be into a 3rd principal building, and then you're granting a special permit
Yeah.
to that 3rd building for X amount of units, whatever it is. That's what I think you were saying. I want to make sure that I'm understanding.
Well, that's what I had in my mind. And what Matt is raising, as I understand it, is because I'm taking the use, multiple principal buildings, as a use of the lot. Whereas Matt is viewing it as the use is the use of a building.
Well, it's both, actually. You're both right, because technically, the use of multiple buildings on a lot is one issue. That's the first issue. You gotta get by that. So to get by that is to say the first two, because there's two principal dwelling units, or, principal buildings on the lot, to extend that under 9 would be into a third building, because that's what the nonconformity is, 2 buildings.
So that you're not considering the barn as a principal building?
No,
As a-
that's the way I'm looking at it right now, okay? So you're extending that into the third building. Now, once you've extended that right into the third building, that's when you can issue that special permit for 2 units, 3 units, whatever it may be. That's what I think I'm hearing.
Under 9.3.
Right.
Yes, and then 9.3 and then under 5. So it's 2 special permits.
Right.
Right.
That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to make sure that, because obviously, when I issue, if you approve it and issue a building permit, that all of that is clarified. You're issuing one first under 9 as the non-conforming principal buildings, residential buildings,
Right.
into a third, and then you're issuing a special permit to allow X amount of units in that.
Third.
Okay, I just want to make sure that. And then the abandonment part of
I
it.
was assuming that the
Fine,
third building was principal, but I think, no,
Leave it at that.
No, I just was trying to make sure I understood what was
Do you
happening.
want to address the abandonment part?
Well, the abandonment part is like any residential use, or any use, let's talk about any use. Abandonment rule is more for commercial than it is for residential. For residential, you physically have to take out what's inside to do it. That being said, if you have a house, say it's bad times, that house sits for 3.5 years, you can't sell it, you can't get rid of it, and it was a 2-family, that use didn't go away. It didn't get abandoned because, there's case law to that effect.
Right.
So if nothing happened in the building, and it's still sitting as it was, my premise is that it hasn't, but it's up to the board's purview on how they want to handle that.
I think my argument, it was I was understanding there to be 3 principal buildings
I thought it was 3
already.
principal buildings also.
But now what I'm hearing is that we consider there to be 2, and then, so,
You're expanding it to 3 and then a special.
right, but I don't know what,
Well,
how do we expand it to 3 without section 6?
but what he's saying is, if that barn had a bathroom and kitchen and was used, even illegally, for residential purposes more than 10 years ago, and that stopped, but the kitchen and bathroom were not ripped out, then you would not have the abandonment over the course of 2 years. Therefore, you do have a building which is a third principal use on the lot. So now you're dealing with a section 9 expansion to expand that pre-existing residential principal building of the barn to a multifamily, which is then allowed under 5.
That's not exactly what I said, but it's another way of looking at it.
Okay.
Because the first thing you gotta get by, in my mind, is 9. Because you have 2 principal residential buildings on one lot, which is not allowed. It's not allowed, correct?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
I don't think we're getting any more information. I think we'll just have to come up as a board, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is there any
I like listening to
additional?
him because he's the one that's going to issue the permit. And I want to make sure he's straight. So
Right, no,
I
but
don't mind letting
We
him.
have a board have to craft how it's written.
Right.
So that he can issue a permit. So I don't,
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any more information we need
And-
up here.
And I'll just make one other point, because there could be some apprehension about any other lot in town that might have today 2 buildings on it that have a residential principal use. And if we apply that same logic, does that mean that somebody could come before us under section 9, expansion of the use, and build 14 other buildings on the lot as an expansion? And I would say, you have to follow the Section 9 expansion, we would, in terms of that consideration, if it's more than 50% increase, you know, and in this case, the expansion is going into an existing building, not a new building.
They're building.
Right, so that could be a differentiation between other applications that we might see that may have pre-existing principal uses.
Existing building that at some point has residential features and is a residential use.
But do we need something from the applicant to demonstrate the residential use? Or are people okay with that? I mean, I don't have the benefit of many years of living here, so.
Personally, I'm comfortable with the evidence that's been presented on the 4-unit and the second building that has a residential use as a pre-existing multiple principal buildings, pre-existing non-conforming multiple principal building use of the lot. The question is whether the applicant chooses to amend their application to seek additional relief.
We would like to amend our application to seek a special permit under 9.3A.
Second.
I'll make a motion to.
In addition to the other two special permits. So.
Yeah, 5, you got it.
Yeah, it's an amend to add, right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I'll make a motion to accept the applicant's request to amend the application to include a special permit under 9.3A.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any other information we need up here?
Good.
I'm good.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if we want to accept it afterwards, but we'd love a draft decision on this.
What's that?
I'm sure we have one.
You have one, it doesn't include 9.3A,
Yeah.
but it includes the other two.
Bob, you need a minute?
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one other question. As I was conceiving of it before this last round of discussion, I was looking at the residential use of the building as the use aspect of this. So in that sense, in my view, that was not an extension of a non-conforming use because residential use per se is permitted by special permit. But now I'm understanding the argument that what's non-conforming is also the fact that 2 of the 3 buildings are considered principal buildings today. And we're being asked to make the 3rd building a 3rd principal building on the lot, which was,
You thought there was 3.
I thought there was 3
also,
initially,
yes.
so that's why I thought we could approach it separately. But now that there are 2 principal buildings that exist and one, I guess you'd call it an accessory building that's going to be converted to a principal building, we're now extending the nonconformity. But
That triggers section 9, right, where you have to determine that it's not substantially more detrimental
To the neighborhood, right.
right.
Which back to Craig saying it's non-conformity because it's multiple buildings. Forget the use for a second. It's multiple
Principal.
principal buildings.
Correct.
Forget whatever use they are, commercial, residential, retail. And if you're adding, and if there's an existing structure you're converting to
Right.
another principal,
But
is
it's
that it's an extension.
extension of a non-conforming.
Expansion of a
Right.
non-conforming, dimensional, it's not a use, because it's more of a dimensional thing, because it's in the dimensional section. It's not a
I'm thinking
use,
of it-
but, it's
u-
something, it's
using a
not a
bin-
use, but it's, yeah,
I'm thinking of it as using a building as a principal building. That's
however
what
you
I
wanna
think
say
it
it,
is.
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
yeah.
And that does not, can we, I'm just struggling with whether or not then that would require a special permit under section 6. Yeah, I understand there's a moratorium and that we're not permitted to issue those things, but there is a provision of the bylaw that deals expressly with multiple principal buildings on a lot. And can you apply section 9 so as to essentially, ignore section 6?
Mr. Chairman, a question. If the barn was used as a residence and there's an affidavit stating such, why wouldn't it be
A principal building.
a building?
Yes, that's what I'm
That's
wondering.
what we're going back and forth on.
Why do you think it's only 2, Dave? Is that like a?
Well, I mean, what's it
long question?
assessed, it could be what it's assessed right now.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing whatsoever other than, okay, there's a bathroom and there's a kitchen in there. I mean, I know people that use those for offices, et cetera. There's no other thing showing that it was actual, I have no other evidence of it. So the only way I could look at it and kind of put this together would be to say that you have 2
You don't know.
principal buildings. And
Because you have no evidence, you have evidence of the
Of the
shed.
other 2, yes. I
But you
the
have no evidence of
for
the barn.
shed, we've gone over it, the evidence for the shed and for the house, but nothing for the barn.
Okay. But then we could change it into 3 principal buildings if we did have, like Tim just said, an affidavit.
Well, if it's an affidavit stating that this was used,
Yeah.
then there's evidence of it, then yeah, then you already have 3 principal
Right.
buildings, and then you just issue the special permit here.
Okay.
But I think what you were just saying though, and again, when you have 2, and you want to extend to a 3rd, the building already exists. I don't think we're setting a precedent because the building exists.
Right.
So as far as any other ones, I'm not worried about those ones at all. But because 6 doesn't exist, we're looking at this as, okay, we have no other avenue but to say, these are non-conforming as 2 principal buildings, and to get into the 3rd one, you could use 9, whatever, whichever part of section 9, to get to that point, and then issue a special permit under 5.
Yeah, I guess the thing I'm stumbling over is if 6 essentially doesn't apply now, right? Which basically means there is no authority under the bylaw to have multiple principal buildings on the same
Right, and that's
lot.
why it's not conforming. Because if you don't
Right,
have it,
Right, but if I create a new one today, I can't get permission through section 6 to do that. Right, that's basically not permitted under the bylaw, right?
But if you were,
Right.
if you were creating a new one, maybe, but
Right.
if it's taking an existing one and just it's definitely in the gray area,
Yeah,
but.
right.
but it also goes along the same lines as if, I know we have section 5, a lot of cities and towns don't have section 5. So for them, it's a variance to get multiple units.
Right.
So in that case, if you have a building that already has, say, 3 units,
Right.
okay, and you want to put a 4th unit, you can do it by an extension of a nonconformity. And that's kind of the same premise going on here. If you look at 6 just doesn't exist, the only way to get there is through an extension of a nonconformity, which is allowed under 9.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm only being that careful because right now, I have no evidence to the barn. That's why, the only reason I'm going that direction.
I'm comfortable with either asking the applicant to provide some evidence that that was a principal building at one point, or if the board prefers to go through 9 to extend it, I'm okay with that too.
I'll agree with you. Either one would suffice for me.
I think we need, well, one, we've amended the application, so we have 9
Right.
in front of us. And I would say, even if you're looking at it as a principal building, Well, we don't know. We don't know whether the evidence they're gonna bring forward is it was never used as a principal, as a resident, or whether it was used as a single family resident. In which case, they're asking us to alter it to a multifamily.
Let's assume it wasn't, they can't, like, it's easier probably just to say,
You
for,
still
you
need
know,
9.
you still need 9, so just
Right.
assume, you know, that it was something they couldn't prove, or they couldn't get the affidavit for some reason, or, you know, somehow, you know, I think you could, you know. well,
It's still gonna be an
push, but-
alteration of a pre-existing non-conforming, and we're gonna,
Make
you
it
know, it
specific
just
to,
depend-
because it's
right,
an existing structure on the property, and the structure is
Right.
not changing its appearance, and it's all the other, you know, things that you would, you know, find on a situation like this, so that someone else can.
we all understand the end
future.
point. We're only questioning where are we at the starting point, but at the end, we're gonna still, wherever we are at the starting point, we're still gonna alter to get to the end point. Alter a pre-existing non-conforming.
Okay. So we good?
I am.
All right,
I am.
all right. Anything else to add?
We
You
have
good?
nothing further unless you need something more from me.
Nope. I'll make a motion to close case 26-17 as amended, right? I mean, yeah.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Let's deliberate, yep.
Dan did said something, he said, to get through the first part. Dan sent a decision for.
Oh, yeah. We have that. So,
Just one copy?
I have
No.
copies.
oh, yeah. He's got copies. Oh,
It's just missing the first part of the 9/3/8.
Thanks.
you didn't do that real quick?
Took your laptop down there?
Dan, you're slipping.
You're slipping.
Do you have another? Do we have another?
We have one extra or no?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
there's
what
an
it is.
extra.
All right,
right.
good, thanks.
Thank you. So the bond's gonna be 3, right? You didn't get there yet?
Barnes 3?
I thought it was 2.
That was 2,
There's gonna be 3 in the bottom.
That's what it says here. Yeah.
I did too. And we're not gonna have yellow stripes in the parking lot, right?
What's the other thing you didn't want? Oh, black tar.
I
We
didn't wanna,
talked about that,
I
yeah.
didn't wanna see it hot top with all, because that'll really it'll ruin the whole facade. Yeah.
This is the revised. Yes, it's the revised.
connect all three buildings to?
So the barn was 3, because it was 2 on the first floor and a third unit on the third floor. Okay.
Second
that's
floor.
right.
Yeah.
Second floor, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Baby one. Do I not have one?
Who?
Foster.
Yeah.
Not
going for his use on the lot.
Yes. That.
Can I relocate
Like
to
it was,
another?
the devil.
Non-conforming use on the lot. I think we're good. I think it was a good question.
He never
Interesting
sat down,
discussion.
he just walked back and forth and forth. My husband used to sit down there and
Didn't really discuss the 50%
then-
between the 4-unit, the other building. True. We're not adding floor space, we're just changing the use. We're increasing the floor area of the use.
Oh,
But I'm still okay with it.
We gotta incorporate 93A into it. I think the decision for those two is pretty covers it. We just gotta incorporate 93A into
Don't
it.
you have to have all three dwellings hooked up?
What's that?
And don't you have to have all three buildings hook up to the sewer?
Yeah, but it says will be, the 3-family. It says it will be right there.
It just says
Will
that
be
the
connected to
existing-
the sewer at the time of construction, yeah. What was that?
Just that one building or the other 2?
No, they are, they will be. They are or they will be, I think is what it,
We need to say that.
yeah.
Where's it?
I mean, it does say it, for, above further findings, that last one says the barn will be connected to the sewer at the time of construction.
Right.
And
Okay.
just find this, I'm sure the single
It should
somewhere.
be on the top.
Yeah,
But the existing house and the shed, are those also connected
whatever that will, it will be.
as a condition of?
We can just do all buildings, right?
Do we wanna walk through some of the
Yeah,
findings?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we gotta figure out, I mean, a lot of these are fine, but we gotta incorporate a whole, another,
Yeah, I don't think
another
we should,
couple pages on for 9.3, right? They don't fit, in the- or they, I guess they do.
No, because 9.3 says we have to follow the same 2.2.
Yeah, okay. all
Which
right.
is the
9
same,
first.
which is the same findings as what's in 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're okay, Madam Clerk, to
I've just been waiting all.
You were waiting for 2 weeks to say
wait,
that.
just wait.
No, I mean, my preference would be not to just adopt this or even
No.
try to handwrite a revision now. I would prefer to draft it whole. You know, taking from this as
Yeah,
appropriate.
we've done both, where we have multiple special permits in one application.
Yeah.
We have done both either way, where each are very different and the findings were very different. We write almost a whole decision with, the information, the conditions, and the findings of the special permit, and then again for the second.
Mhm.
In other cases where much of the findings are common, to both. We may vote to grant the 2 special permits and then base it on the same sets of findings. So we'll have to look in this case whether each special permit deviates from the other. In my view, it doesn't.
Right,
I mean, I
right.
think it can be easily consolidated into a single set of findings.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And then, like, going through some of the findings, I'm on page 4, starting with the vehicular pedestrian traffic. I do find that, especially expanding to a 3rd principal building on the lot will increase the vehicular and pedestrian traffic. But I think that the lot is of sufficient size, and the changes planned for a paved, or I won't say paved, for a parking area constructed for that purpose makes the additional vehicular or pedestrian traffic not more harmful.
Right, because you're not
To the
back
neighbor.
out, you can turn around, and head out, right.
Yeah.
Everything else is good.
I've never seen anybody jack out, just turn around.
Yeah. I think he was changing location.
I'm okay with D, just how it is in terms of the dimensional. D is in David,
Yeah.
the dimensional. Again, there's no change in the footprint. I might add to E, I think the renovation and the fact that a lot of these residents are now going to be altered under a building permit, it actually reduces the risk of fire.
Well, they gotta comply, that will all be code compliant.
And I think it,
No, but you're right.
That's a
I
good
think
point.
it-
200-year-old
That's a
house.
good point,
You're
right.
I think it brings it more in line with the bylaw.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good
And
point.
it's safer and will create less of a hazard to the neighborhood.
Mhm. I'm okay with F. I would amend on the character, preserving the historic character of the existing property. I think the work done to,
But yeah,
oh, already in H?
well, is that what you're saying, G, yeah?
Well,
Right, we can put it, that added there too, yeah.
The historic.
The historic character, yeah.
I think the way he's proposing the renovation, preserving the exterior treatment of the buildings, and the way he's structured the multiple units in the existing building footprint has preserved the historic character.
Got that, Amy?
Yeah, I do.
if we even want to add to it, is because they're not adding any new structures to the property. They're not increasing or altering the density on the lot either.
And the layout of the structure, they're the same.
Yeah.
The layout of existing
The
structures.
layout
doesn't
and the
change.
density. We would add that in on G.
Don't we have to vote on 9 first?
Yeah. Because we couldn't grant the multifamily 5 without the
Yep.
9.
Expanding the. Right to how,
Do you
what's
wanna-
the,
do we have any conditions that we,
On
all
9?
the
Are we-
ones, just the
Online?
ones?
The
Well-
gravel walkways.
are we gonna, there was discussion about whether the other 2 buildings are to be connected to the sewer line. Is that gonna be a condition that all,
It does say it
all
in here.
3 buildings?
I think it's in here, but yeah.
It's in, okay.
Say it.
Gravel walkways was the first, connecting each of the principal buildings
Is it
to
gravel walkways or from concrete?
sewer and water.
What's wrong, Amy?
I don't think,
She's good.
nothing.
What's wrong?
Gravel?
It's for the character.
Okay.
Yeah,
To
Chief.
preserve, it's, and that was discussed, the
At the
applicant
last meeting.
stipulated at the prior hearing that the pathways will be,
He just said not
I,
tapped.
right,
okay, that's fine,
Right.
that's,
I think cause
Or sim,
conservation,
we could gravel or similar I mean, you know.
Right.
just not tar, just
Right.
not tar,
Correct,
okay.
right?
Right.
or we could say consistent with the
Okay.
historic character.
The historic
Yeah,
character of
that's
the
good.
place, yeah.
Gaslit lanterns.
Town crier.
Sewer,
God only knows he was.
Each of the
Running
principal,
water,
each of the
electricity.
3 principal buildings will be connected to town water and sewer.
Yeah, I think
All
it's just
buildings.
town sewer, is it water and sewer?
Oh, I don't
I don't know
know,
if they have to connect, I mean, I'm sure they'll connect to water, but I don't think they,
so just sewer?
I think it's just
yeah.
sewer, which is in the
Okay.
bylaw, yeah.
Sorry.
I may not wanna put that in, see.
I'm presuming an OOC was issued already,
What?
Yes.
order conditions? I'd recommend that you make a reference on that.
Oh, yeah, I already wrote that on mine too,
Okay.
to include conservation's order.
Yeah.
She probably already did that. It's on my page. Coming.
That's a condition?
It doesn't necessarily have to be a condition, but I think it should be referenced, just so that if
Oh,
this one
reference it.
person has this
Yeah,
decision, if
definitely.
if a vendor or a project manager, that he or she should be made aware that there's also an OOC out
Yeah.
there, that's all.
No, it was first on my list right
Put
here
it in
too, I'm
the,
with you.
Facts.
So where do we wanna put that, just general reasons for the decision?
Sure.
Yeah.
We just make a cross-reference, that,
Yeah,
Right.
reference
the board
that.
knows, yeah.
Yeah,
So
applicant
here-
already obtained order conditions and the case number.
Yep. So,
there's the general one,
Yeah.
so it's here,
okay.
3 units.
You'll have to look up the case number, Amy, I know, unless you have
Sheesh.
it memorized.
I think it's like 1144.
And then it was constructed in accordance with the plans,
Right.
stamped February 13th, 2018.
There wasn't there 2 sets of plans?
Yeah, the most recent one is February,
Make sure you get the
Stamp.
correct date.
yeah, most recent.
I never found the evidence this was done, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple comments on there.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
right.
E911 we
Incorporate.
should include as a
Yeah,
condition.
it would just include her 3. one of them is the submission of utility as-built, and I would just put
put
the,
Maggie's
whatever
right
she
in it,
wrote,
too.
I'd put them right in there, her three items.
The standard, the work will be, the alterations in construction will be performed as presented.
Oh, yep, I have that.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Are we adding specific stuff on 9 in there? Anything out that can, other than what we just added?
We could, in terms of the character section, was that G, have a finding that,
You just wanna add it everywhere, it's referenced as 5D, 13D, and 9.3.
I was gonna say terms of character, which is on, it's G.
Yeah.
Under the character, is that the expansion of the pre-existing use to the barn does not create an additional building on the property.
Yeah, it's within an existing structure, right,
Yeah.
yeah. We gotta, so that way no one could then try to
Right.
add, say.
It's somewhat blatant, but it's fine to reference it in the finding.
Because it's different.
Right, it's gotta be in there somewhere.
Well,
We're allowing a expansion of a non-conforming.
it's a reason
of
for
the
our
non-conforming
decision,
principal
right.
buildings into a, because it's into a existing structure, that's,
Right,
the footprint is not changing,
right.
yeah.
And I put it, I mean, I was
And
suggesting that it's in the
and
character,
is in
right.
character
It
with
didn't
the-
alter the character of the lot.
And the
Because it
neighborhood.
did, or the
Yeah.
neighborhood,
Yeah.
because it didn't create, well, and we had discussed before in terms of the density, so that goes along, that the expansion of the principal use to a third building is into a structure which does not increase the density
Right.
or the layout of the buildings on the property. Ties the two together.
And I think the point that residential use is allowed in this district is also, further supported. On the plans references, we have one from American Engineering, and then we have another set for, I don't know,
The architecturals.
yeah, and we gotta reference both in the decision. This has more of the interior layout of the units, and this has more of like a site plan. It doesn't speak to the interior stuff. Okay, I just didn't know how people felt about referencing both.
I think it's gotta comply with building codes, so.
Right.
that would-
Yeah, okay.
I mean, he does, it's all 1s and 2s, so I think that's, we'd wanna, that's what's been proposed, so I wouldn't want it to be, 3-bedroom units in there now. They're all
Okay.
proposed as 1s and 2s, I think.
Right. But whether he puts 2 on the first floor and 1 on the second, or
Right,
1 on the,
right.
or 2 on the second and 1 on the
Moves
first,
kitchen
I don't know
into
that
here,
it doesn't
moves the
change
bath to there.
from a
Oh,
zoning
right.
perspective.
But you'd want a condition to limit it to maximum of 2 bedrooms per unit, is that what you're
I
saying?
think it's in
No?
the decision already,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
I think,
It's not a condition, but it's an observation of what was presented.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the application that was before us, that's what they applied for, and this is what, and one of the conditions is that it will be constructed according to the plan, so.
yeah.
Right. But I think the number of bedrooms, that sort
include a
of
separate
information
condition if you
is,
think.
no, I'm just saying that's not reflected in this set of plans, it's reflected in this set of plans. I'm just wondering if we need to reference both. But if not, I'm fine either way.
We could put no 3 bedrooms as shown on the architecturals.
Yeah, I don't know what
Could do something like that. That way-
cottage is, that one maybe.
Don't we have that somewhere?
One bedroom in the common.
Right, is that what
Yeah.
it says? Single dwelling. I mean, we could do something like that and just say, no 3 dwelling units as shown
No.
in the architecturals.
Because, you know, number C
That
says
way
the
you can
proposed
mix-
dwelling units are a mixture of 1 and 2 bedrooms. It's already, it's in here already.
It's in there,
Yeah.
all right,
Mhm.
Yeah.
we can incorporate that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's
Yeah.
in the, it's
It's
in
in
the,
there.
Okay.
the decision. That's fine.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, I think I'm good. In good shape. Yeah. We're gonna make a motion on the 9 first.
We have everything on, that's good with,
Sure.
Amy, you got everything?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, under 9 first, right?
Gotta read this properly.
Sue wants to make it.
No, I don't really, I'm just making sure we word it properly, because it's not in front of us. I actually have a copy today.
Can I get a point of clarification?
Sure.
One of the conditions you put on water and sewer are you said
Sewer.
the word separate. Because right now I have a case where.
That's right, that was brought up at town meeting, they wanted us to do separate.
The word, yeah,
word
but also I
separate.
have a case right now where the word
Yeah.
separate is not in there, and they actually put the sewer line in through the main house and then out.
No,
Separate.
It's been
You're
backing
right.
up for.
that's good you
Good,
brought that up.
thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Yes.
I separate.
Yeah, the word separate.
Yeah, we did,
Right.
yeah, either.
Did you
yeah.
do it already?
No, I did each, but
Each,
Oh.
that's,
but separate.
that's what I had in
Yeah.
my mind.
Yep.
All right.
Go ahead, you can make it math.
No,
Right, that's all I have to say.
So, you want me to do that?
Yeah, go for it.
So, I'll grant it, I'm sorry, I'll
That's
make a
nice.
motion. Yeah, I'll grant it.
Jumping.
I'll make a motion to grant special permit under section 9(3)(a) of the zoning bylaw to allow for the alteration, expansion, or extension of the pre-existing non-conforming use of multiple principal buildings on a lot to allow for a third principal building.
Second?
all right, all in favor?
Aye. Keep going.
Keep going.
So I'll make a
do
motion
both of them, right?
to grant a special permit under section 5B, table 5B13D of the zoning bylaw to allow 4-unit multifamily dwelling in the existing house structure on 255 Union Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And then finally, I'll make a motion to grant special permit under section 5B, table 5B13C of the zoning bylaw to allow a 3-family dwelling in the existing barn structure at 255 Union Street.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There you go.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys. Good luck.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Good luck.
All right, moving on. Minutes, thank you. I think we're good right now. Yep, I know, on the next March meeting, we got a bunch of cases. I don't know if you plan, if there's anything you needed to be here for. I haven't delved into what we have that night, but I don't know if it's stuff you need. Yeah, I don't know if there's stuff you need to be there for, but we do have 4 cases that night, so.
On that, I would say, feel free, or I would encourage you to check with the board, because in some cases, I may not necessarily know what cases are gonna be before us to extend the invitation for you to join, so,
Yeah.
personally, if, in talking to the office, if you see any particular cases and you think that, it would help for you to join, you're more than welcome.
Okay, and I do anticipate making comments on some if I feel it's necessary to.
That's fine too.
Yeah, I've included community development now on any of the comment requests, so he will
Thank
get
you.
everything that comes before the board.
Perfect.
I'd be more than happy to work with Amy. I was just noticing a couple of things on the approval letter that I think might be helpful to add to it. Nothing substantive, more procedural.
Yep.
But if the board's
Yeah,
open.
we would love to, the more we could have you here, the happier we'd be.
Okay.
So.
Very good.
Especially, I mean, when you have a busy night with 4 cases, again, and not knowing right now what, I haven't, looked at the details, so it's, if, I would say use your best judgment, and, if there's anything you could add to a case, and even if you don't come, even something in writing, any, comments or suggestions or a memo to the board of,
It'd be my pleasure.
yeah, that would be helpful. Yep.
Yeah, particularly when an applicant has applications in front of multiple boards, having that
Coordination's
input
very
is-
important.
Yeah,
We
having that.
haven't had anybody in a long time that has been able to assist the board in some of this, so it's a welcome to have somebody that can do that. So like I said, if it's not in person, even if you wanted to submit something to us, we would appreciate it, yeah.
That's what I'm here for. A question on this, so obviously there's a signature, one person signing it. So Amy's gonna go back tomorrow and then make all the changes, and then there'll be one person coming in and signing it? Is that how it's gonna?
That we've always, that's,
A draft decision, I was a former clerk.
Recently appointed clerk.
Been doing that all day.
You don't have a job, right?
So our procedures, which of course we don't document, it's just been passed down
Sure.
from one clerk to the next, has been that once a decision is drafted, it goes to the clerk to review, and, looking it over in terms of the information. We didn't have the benefit of the video in those days, so it was often done by memory or notes. And then iterate with any edits, and once we have a final decision, then it goes to the clerk either for signature or for approval to be signed on behalf of the clerk. Any input in terms of the initial or subsequent drafts, in terms of editing, would also be welcome.
Excellent, I'll be happy to do that and pass them along.
great.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'm gonna,
We're gonna be spoiled.
I know. No, I'm looking for it, I'm looking for it.
looking forward to helping
Let me
out.
give it to Craig. Give that letter I gave you before, and I take it back.
So now I passed it on to the file.
Oh.
You want it?
No, well, yeah.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, minutes. The January 24th minutes.
Before we decide.
No, this is,
It says 19.
No. Yeah.
Oh, we
19.
did the 7th, that's right.
Yes. The minutes of the meetings of the 24th. On the second page there, it said Coffee stated she doesn't need additional information submitted. The character, the neighborhood, or the traffic are primary concerns. I remember referencing this Ed Shea, who said there are 6 or 7 houses on Burns Ave. Take 4 of those houses, and that's going to be where you're going to put 12 houses. And I thought that's far too dense. It was just at the very, very end.
right, so I have Ed Shea here, so what do you want,
Well, no, but what you have here is that my primary concern was the neighborhood, character of the neighborhood and density was another big thing. And the reason I made that comment is I referenced what Ed Shea had said. So you might say, I don't know how you would say it. I don't know, how would you put that in there?
Which part are you trying?
In other words, what it's saying here, my primary concern was the neighborhood and the traffic. And I made a point of saying that density was another big issue for me. And I referenced that Ed Shea, who was the last person who spoke.
Yeah.
He said there are 6 or 7 houses on Burns Ave.
Yeah.
You take the land, only 4 of those houses are on. And that is the amount of land that 12 of these dwellings would go on,
Right.
which I thought was far too dense.
Right,
And
so
it
we
wasn't
should
in
add,
here.
so the
So
character,
so
the neighborhood,
density.
traffic,
The density.
and density
Yeah.
based on, information provided on, the lot sizes in the neighborhood or something like that. Is that what you're, that's
Yeah,
what,
I wanna
was
get
he the
in
guy
the
who
density, yeah.
provided the spreadsheet of the?
No, he was the last guy to get up here and said, I just want to say to you, there's 6 houses on Burns Ave, 6 or 7. And on the property of only 4 of those houses is the same amount of land that this man is proposing, 12 buildings. So somehow, brevity.
So we say, Coffey stated that she does not need, and that should be any additional information submitted, and the density, comma, the character of the neighborhood and traffic are her primary concerns. Does that address it?
She wants it more specific.
I want it more specific.
Specific? Okay, so then, and the density
She
as
reiterated,
articulated
reiterated-
by
she
Ed,
reiterated what Ed Shea
She
said.
reiterated Ed Shea's comment.
okay, regarding
That-
density.
4
Yes.
house lots on Burns Ave.
6.
No, only 4 of the 6.
Oh, okay.
4 house
there were
lots
7
on Burn, no. He said there was 6 or 7, but I don't think we need to get into that.
You're
Oh, we
saying he
can,
was
we could
mentioning
say.
the 4.
Ed Shea pointed out the fact that there's, 6 or 7 houses on Burns Ave. 4 of them are on the same amount of land as the developer is gonna put 12 houses.
Okay.
And so density is a big issue.
Alright.
Period. That's
Period.
perfect the way you said it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if you
You
throw.
did, she did say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if you throw density in with traffic and whatever, it
It's
does,
lost.
gives the
Yeah.
same impact as 12 places are gonna be built where only 4 houses were.
Did I give you that
You
letter
don't get
back?
that?
No.
Um,
Couldn't have that.
Oh.
Do I have to turn over my phone or whatever? I don't do any emailing about this.
I would honestly just email Jim and ask him.
Yeah.
It says don't use my personal email. I can't use my work one either.
Well, we don't get town emails, so.
You did get my message, Amy, didn't you?
I did.
You know me.
I know, but
So-
honestly, if any of you have any questions with that, just email Jim, because
Yeah.
he's the one taking care of gathering of the public records and giving it,
Mhm.
so.
Has he got what's happening with his assistant? Is he getting one?
I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, any other comments to the minutes?
I don't.
Yeah, okay.
I just have a couple. On page 1, the 4th line from the bottom, where it starts with commission and will be, I think, subsurface as opposed to subsurface.
What'd you say, 4th from the bottom?
4th from the bottom on page 1,
Of February, January 24th?
January 24th.
Yeah, okay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, subsurfaced, yeah.
Would be graded and is that what you're talking?
Right, and then it just says, the 4th one up from the bottom starts with the word commission,
Who is that?
Where are you? You're not different.
Order of conditions?
January 24th, first page.
That's what I have
Yeah.
here, and I don't see anything. Oh, existing order of conditions, okay. 1 is complete, the property will be graded, restored, replantings to be done according to the existing order of conditions. Is that what you're talking about?
No,
But
I'm
do you
not.
not have the same
I'm looking
thing?
at a different,
Yours is different than ours?
maybe I'm just, maybe it's my print on this slightly. Okay,
No,
so
but-
actually, on this version, it's, it's maybe, it's like 4 or 5 lines down from the top.
So you have a different, this is.
I think I just
different
it
version?
printed it, it's the same version, it's just printed out on different font, I think,
Oh,
so
yeah.
there's
Oh,
less
okay.
information.
All right, so go back to where you are.
Approved by the subsurfaced.
Approved
Yeah.
by the Conservation
Surfaced,
Commission and will be
surfaced. Yeah.
all be subsurface with no facilities or structures.
Should be
Surface.
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 Subsurface.
Surface,
Right.
not
Yeah.
service.
S-U-R. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Spell check wouldn't pick that up.
And then I guess further on in that paragraph, the next sentence starts with Petrozzi stated that the sewer would be the one to go in first, blah, blah, blah. It would be approximately 1 to 2 days, weather permitting, with the water line following after the sewer is complete,
Yeah,
and then
once.
once all, so that word once should be once.
Yeah.
And
And when
then-
Jane's sentence, it was, any was and, not and,
Yeah.
any, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure she got that.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, the one you were saying, it said any, said and.
Oh,
Just
oh, oh.
fixing that, so.
And then
Did you have that?
continuing,
Did you
Yeah, I
have
think
the
she saw that when she,
Petrozzi one?
Yeah, these all have to be good because it's going.
once all is complete, that's it, one.
Yeah, I have the one song.
Yeah, she got that.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, I wasn't sure if you got it.
and then further on in that sentence where it says the replantings do be done, should be to be done. And then at the very bottom of that case, just the continuation deliberation will take place February 7th
at
at
7, not 78 o'clock.
78 p.m.
Do we need to put the comment in there that you made, Rob, following up on my fully stated comment that there were so many flags on this particular project that it almost circumvented the intent of the bylaw? Now, you said something else about that. Would that
I did
yes
say
or
that.
no?
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of that, and we put, I think on the next one too, when we deliberated, we could put it in, but it's all referenced in the decision too.
It is.
But we
Okay,
could put it, we could put it in too.
Back at
Yeah.
the subdivision control.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that got in, because that was.
Yeah.
Welcome back. The Hysterical Society is all over, huh?
That is it for the January 24th.
Motion.
I'm all set for that.
Sure.
Make a motion to accept the minutes of January 24th.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
February 7th is pretty straightforward, so. Unless there's
Is
a,
Billy O'Connell coming back on the 7th?
April 4th.
the April, yeah.
April?
Yeah,
Who's he? I forget.
the hotel.
Hotel thing.
Oh. O'Connell was his name?
Is the attorney.
The lawyer.
Oh, I was just gonna say.
I don't know the
Not
other
that
guy's
there
name.
were a lot
He-
of it was there either.
His name was in here though, I saw it.
No,
He likes Craig.
They all like Craig.
He's gonna be very disappointed.
Yes. He's not going to, what
More
this,
Madam
yeah.
Clerk. What?
All right, I'll make a did everybody finish reading these?
Yep, that one's easy, yep.
You all set?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Make a motion to accept February 7th, 2018.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. We'll make a motion to, do we have any other,
Business.
we have on there ZBA procedures and policies? Yeah, all right. And
I-
make
I
a
would-
motion.
Oh, I would say
God.
it would probably be something to,
Go over with Tim.
with Tim.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
We all agree?
Yep.
So.
Yes.
Yeah.
should we go
Yes.
on the next agenda, or like,
Make a motion to adjourn.
or do I need to even
Wait, she's
We
still
do,
talking.
if we're gonna, if you have something to,
we don't even have anything in place.
I gotta
yet.
drive into the
Well,
fog.
Do I need to do it with Tim and like put it on the agenda here, or just like have it?
no.
No,
So the
no, no.
board just asked you to work with Tim, so
Yeah.
you can do that.
Okay.
And then when you and Tim have something for the board to review,
Bring
put
it
it
back.
on the
Yeah.
agenda,
And put-
All right.
we'll-
and then we
we'll-
can review it.
So
Yeah.
we'll just table it until we create something.
Yes.
All right.
All right, make a motion to adjourn the February 21st, 2018
Second.
meeting. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Hey, Matt.